Welcome to the Combot Collective.
Hello everybody and welcome to a very unique news episode of the Combot Collective here, bringing you everything you want to know and potentially what you don't want to know about the 2021 Battlebots season, which of course is just wrapped up. We're about a week removed from all the controversy and chaos that came from the Hydra situation, the Witch Doctor and Minotaur situation, which we're here to talk about today as we have some pretty damning info that has been sent to us by our anonymous sources here. I am joined this week by Pory, Nog, and Freeze. How are you guys doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good.
It just keeps getting better.
This is pretty spicy, yeah. Ooh, and I, of course, am Sterling Brown, person in charge of King of Draft, Battlebots moderator, and Battlebots subreddit moderator, and former writer at Third Law Sports here. Like we said, we have a pretty interesting situation. Of course, there's been a lot of controversy and discussion about the whole Witch Doctor and Minotaur thing going on from our finale episode that we just had in the quarterfinals. A lot of this stuff you have already heard. We know how John Remar and the Battlebots team have felt about it. They put out their public stance on Facebook on multiple pages. One of the Battlebots subreddit moderators has made a post about their time personally at the event and their situation there, which you can find on the Battlebots subreddit itself. But we have some pretty interesting stuff here coming from our anonymous sources. We're going to be covering this bit by bit here, and we will have a link in the description below covering everything that we're going to be talking about in this video, so you can follow along. And of course, in our corner screen here, we will have the information as well, but we know it can get a little blurry, so like I said, the document for this will be in the description below. Please feel free to follow it and share it, check it out. We got some interesting discussion here about Witch Doctor from our sources here. These sources, of course, coming from Battlebots teams themselves. Let's go through the list here, top bit here, talking about the Witch Doctor situation itself. From our sources and from a lot of people in the online community and ourselves have stated that there is a bit of clear bias for Witch Doctor and the team, busted up robotics in terms of, you know, their veteranship in Battlebots. From our sources, there apparently has been some favoritism, some very obvious favoritism coming from the producers themselves about Witch Doctor here, as in 2020, as some people know, Busted Nuts Robotics and Witch Doctor was not originally going to attend that year's COVID Battlebots event, but according to our sources, producers apparently begged them to attend, going as far as to give them that bounty tournament slot and give them the same treatment as the other bounty tournament robots like Bronco, like Son of Waiachi, like Ice Wave, which one of those being having a larger pit, which is farther away from everybody else. And this, of course, can be backed up in a Witch Doctor post made all the way back in October 2020, saying that it was a last-minute decision that the team would go to Battlebots that year, that they were in fact on a road trip when they ended up making the decision to go to Battlebots that year. Also, coming from our same sources here, Witch Doctor's placement in the 2021 top 32 was potentially by some design, as Battlebots' new glitch would have some trouble getting ready. As we have talked about a little bit before in the past, Freeze has brought it up. Glitch was notorious apparently during the 2021 regular season for kind of taking until the last minute to repair their stuff. You know, you can give them some slack because they are a brand new team and Glitch was a very advanced, impressive robot. But this isn't about Glitch, of course. It is common knowledge now to know that Glitch vs. Kraken was the very last regular season fight. So in turn, they had the least time out of all top 32 robots to prepare, which ended up causing them to get pulled out of the 2021 top 32 tournament in place of Mammoth Ball robots. Kind of suspicious how it's a bit of an easy robot for Witch Doctor. I know that can be up for debate, depending on what fan you talk about and how they feel about Mammoth and Witch Doctor, but it does seem like a fairly one-sided matchup on paper. Let's jump to some of the juicy stuff here. We're going to talk about the Unstick situation, as we now talk about the Witch Doctor and Minotaur fight, which happened a week ago as of when we're recording this here. During that fight, as a lot of fans know, Witch Doctor, while they were spinning their weapon and Minotaur was spinning around with one wheel, Witch Doctor got stuck in the upper deck wall, and within apparently 9 to 11 seconds, an unstick was called, which was way too early of a call, as Minotaur could have potentially landed a hit in the supposed 20-second window the robot was supposed to get. That is the time normally allowed, which John Remar has got on record to say he should have waited a little bit longer. But, I mean, it was a whole 10 seconds. I would go over more than a couple seconds longer. Battlebots subreddit moderator said, being present at the event on Reddit, that the unstick ended up taking a good bit of time from what he said. But our sources have stated that, who was also at Battlebots in the pits likely during all of this, that this unstick ended up taking around 15 entire minutes to get Witch Doctor pulled out of the spike strips wall here in real time, which, as said by Personizzle, as said by our sources, this severely agitated the audience and led to some of the chaos that ended up happening during the live filming. But what recently has come out, it gets even spicier here, is that the official Battlebots rules, the Battlebots tournament rules PDF, which is both the Battlebots builders and Battlebots themselves follow officially, was made available on August 16th, 2021, and was supposedly secretly updated on December 19th, 2021, as this update would quietly add the shelf unstick rule, which we saw in action during the fight. Now, let's go down here a little bit to exactly what that rule change was before we get into the chat discussion here. The rule change in question on version 1.0, which was the version used of Battlebots 2021, updated during that point. It was in the August-September window that this rule set was added. Rule 7.5.4, robot on the shelf. It was more so known as the shelf at the time. A robot that is only partially on the platform and partially on the arena floor will be considered to be on the shelf if the referees jointly determine that a robot has been on the shelf for an unnecessarily excessive amount of time. A referee will notify the robot operators and then begin a 10-second countdown. If the robot fails to be off the shelf before the end of the countdown, the robot will be declared incapacitated. And then we go to version 1.1, which is debatably version 1.12 from what we are about to learn. Version 7.5.4, robot on the upper deck. If any attached part of a robot is touching the floor of the upper deck, the robot will be considered to be on the upper deck. Touching the surrounding spike strips or screws will not be considered on the upper deck. I feel like that's a big thing here. If the referees jointly determine that a robot has been on the upper deck for an unnecessarily excessive amount of time, referee will notify the robot operators and then begin a 10-second countdown. If the robot fails to be off the upper deck before the end of the countdown, it will be declared incapacitated. So there, in the middle right there, seems to be the big rule change. Now, this specific rule set was cited by head referee and producer of Battlebots, John Remar, in a Facebook group thread. I believe it's the official Battlebots Facebook group that he made this post here. The official full thread of that discussion is in the document in the description below, so please check that out. But we do have cited here John Remar talking about this situation, stating, unfortunately, the numerous sticks that have happened in both this season and many seasons past were not shown on TV at all, and have always been edited out, so I don't blame fans one bit for feeling like the rules may have been manipulated because they have never seen that before. But there have been many times we've called timeouts to unstick. And let's remember, the rules state that the unstick timeouts can be called in specific situations and not in others, so I believe we've been consistent with that, but from a fan standpoint, it may not look that way. And that is totally fair criticism. During the Minotaur versus Witch Doctor fight, an edit was made to shorten the time, I suppose for TV, that it looked like the timeout was called immediately. It was not called immediately, however, but I probably could have given it 2 or 3 more seconds. Always learning lessons. If you read the rules, you will clearly see that certain places in the arena allow for a referee to call for a timeout or an unstick. There are also times when the Battlebots officials feel that it's not safe to unstick and therefore send it to the judges. Sometimes this makes television, sometimes it doesn't, but in no way does it change the outcome of any of the fights. Maybe you can agree with the decisions or the referees, or maybe you don't. Certainly we welcome any and all feedback. We have thick skin and we've been doing this for a long time. So, of course, there was numerous discussion from both ends of the table about how they felt about this John Remar thing. Dustin Eswine, captain of D6, did end up making a comment on here, disagreeing with it and debating it a little bit. Of course, he has some room to talk, given the whole kill saw situation which happened this year. Some discussion between him and some of the other fans and John himself. Andrew of the Deep Six team also chimed in, but that's not what we're really talking about here, as later on Sunday, April 10th, 2022, this whole chain of discussion happened, which we'll put up right here between P1 captain Brandon Zielinski and John Remar. Brandon Zielinski opens up by sharing the rule set John Remar has brought up, the one that we have in the document below, version 1.1, as Battlebots would have it said. And then Brandon says, John, are you 100% sure that this was the version used at filming? John says, I have no reason to think otherwise, which Brandon follows up with, the reason I ask is because I was confused at these different versions. The version you linked was modified in December. There we go again, which is, of course, after the season was filmed. Do you know why that is? This, of course, got some likes from a few Battlebots captains and builders, Crypt Crew members, kind of calling out his case here. We'll put up this picture here, and once again, check the document for the full HD picture. And here it says right here, author Frank Jenkins. That's a little bit interesting. I don't think anybody knows about a Frank Jenkins that's directly affiliated with Battlebots. I don't know if that's important or not, but then we go down here to the create and modify date. It says December 19th, 2021, well after when all of this Battlebot stuff occurred and went down. And that is the real rise of issue, because from our sources and from what we've seen ourselves believe that that rule change was modified and added during this window of time in this December and January window to potentially cover Witch Doctor's case here, but the chat logs don't stop here. John Remar did end up eventually replying to this in some capacity. Brandon would go on Monday, April 11, 2022 to come back and say, just circling back on this, specifically, there's very clear language added in 1.1 on what counts as being stuck on the shelf. Before touching any part of the shelf, count as being stuck on the shelf and will be deemed a count out. Afterwards, the verbiage changed to specifically call out the outside spike strips as not being stuck on the shelf. Were these edits made in December as the metadata would suggest? John would go on with two posts here saying, I don't believe so, but it was very clear to me and Dave, the other referee, at the beginning of the tournament that the spike rail around the shelf would be considered stuck. We actually had a special meeting on it. Not specifically, and then he goes on here, talking about the metadata itself, not specifically as I don't do the document editing, but sometimes rules get changed right up to the point we start a single match, which that in itself seems incredibly suspicious and unprofessional, but that's a story for another day. Teams are notified, and many times their input is done to help dictate the change in the rules. Brandon then finally adds, I get that, but this isn't a change on August 20th through September 5th, which is when, of course, Battlebots is officially happening. This was on December 19th with a post dating, it was added to the website, or dating on the website, I should say, sorry, to August 16th. If it, for example, was just an update for Season 7, why does the website still say August the 16th? Makes sense that you don't do the editing, but could you potentially contact who does? And from what we know, John has not replied to that. It has been silent, and our sources have also confirmed that they have, and from that point, we do not know what's going on. We do have the PDFs, the 1.0 and the 1.1, if you want to take a look at those. And in conclusion here, we've talked about everything else on this document so far. From our sources, builders have apparently become very wary of this situation, and in turn have apparently been quite upset about it. And our sources have also stated that the producers already know many of the top 32 robots before the season begins, and it pretty much really sucks. On April 15th, there has been some talks about Battlebots potentially making some unstick ruling changes in the supporter group. I won't go too in depth on that because it is a supporter thing, but I feel like that should be known. We should preface this and postface this by saying that you should not be mad at Minotaur, don't be mad at Witch Doctor, don't even be mad at Battlebots about this, because it seems like they have handled the situation. The builders have made their grievances clear, but I'm just 4 days after this incident all went down. I don't know if there's any correlation with that. Obviously, they've had plenty of time to talk about it, but it all does seem very interesting how this all lines up time-wise just after the episode. And that's going to cover everything that we have in the document so far. So to give a quick summary here, it does seem like Battlebots may have tried to make some sneaky rule changes on the official 2021 tournament document on December 19th, while potentially leaving it as August 16th as the time the ruling was changed in our 1.1 document here. I think that covers all of it. It just seems really greasy. I'm glad that they did make the changes, but you still got to call this out, and you got to say something, because this is a way too big of a group for them to be making something silly like this, trying to do some sneaky changes. This is 2022 on the internet. Stuff gets seen. It was brought to us pretty quickly by our sources when they found out. Now let's get to talking about this. What are y'all's thoughts on this whole situation? You guys have been right by me as we've been breaking this apart, figuring out everything so we can make sure we got as many of the facts right that we believe we have correct here. But yeah, what are y'all thinking about this whole ordeal?
Yeah, I think it's really, like, messy and shady, but a lot of it does up, like, you know, the witch doctor favoritism thing, like, it kind of tracks, like, not just this season, but like previous seasons too, like the inconsistencies pertaining to witch doctor and stuff. Like, I get they're a fan favorite, but like you can't just be, you know, treating certain robots better than other robots. Like, that obvious. Just doesn't seem. Yeah, well, you shouldn't be doing it. Period. Like,
that's
if you're
true.
like if Witch Doctor or Tombstone, you know, who else is popular? Bronco. Like, if they do poorly, Lockjaw. You know, then Lockjaw. You know, if they do poorly, then they do poorly. It is what it is. You know, it sucks to see them not make the bracket, but like, you know, if you don't make the bracket, it is what it is. You know, but you can't really give them special treatment, especially when builders, you know, put so much time and effort and money into this. The builders ain't getting paid. They're in the red every year, and you know, you're in the red every year. You travel to Las Vegas, and then you just have to deal with, like, you have to deal with them just being like, oh yeah, this robot is gonna go ahead and get some special treatment. Like, that wouldn't sit right with me. I mean, I'm not a builder, but if I was, I would be furious about this. Especially, like, look at Minotaur. Like, they had to deal with this. Like,
they had to deal with a lot here.
They traveled from Brazil during pandemic, you know, had to quarantine. Daniel Freitas dealt with some very horrible scenarios, still showed up, still gave it his all, and then they're just like, no. Like, and one thing I'm wondering is, how would this have played out if Minotaur did not lose a wheel in that fight? Would they have still called for the unstick? I don't know the answer, but yeah, they should have waited longer. And quite frankly, 15 minutes to unstick, like, I feel like at that point you should just call it. You should call it.
At that point, I feel like
one of the most damning
I feel like
things,
even with the I feel like even with the changed rules, even if you're going by the ones where they've specifically, you know, talked about this being a stuck and not a mobilization, I feel like if it's taking 15 minutes to get a robot unstuck, that surely would fall into, we can't get this robot unstuck safely in a you know, competent amount of time. Like, it was a different situation where it was more danger than the time, but you know, with Cobalt supposedly wasn't able to spin their weapon down, they decided to take that to a decision instead of unsticking them. I mean, and remember, this is the same tournament. This was probably the day before. And, you know, we watched that happen a week ago, and then we got to go into this finals episode and watch a similar situation happen where they treat it differently. You know, it's just a little...
And keep in mind that with the Cobalt whiplashing, they were dishonest about it. Cobalt was able to spin its weapon down. It just, I guess, like, the specific part to, like, power down the weapon wasn't...
Yes, you could definitely still make a strong case for, we don't feel like this could be stopped safely, but they didn't represent it honestly on TV, and they really weren't representing it honestly even outside of TV when they were making their explanations. I mean, these were things that were found out mostly through the Whiplash team and other members telling us about what happened after the fact.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's just it all really, like, stinks, like, honestly. And yeah, I feel that they definitely have to improve with this. They have to stop with the favoritism, because another thing I want to point out is the whole good chunk of the round of 32 being decided before the competition begins. Like, that's really shady, but it adds up because you look at how many
clear, especially with this year. Yeah,
matches. Yeah, like, it's so obvious now in retrospect. You look at all the robots that are like, oh, this robot's, you know, 0-1. Let's give them, you know, the the robots that aren't even ready to fight, and then
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to be cynical hearing about this now, because I think when we were discussing it while it was happening, or even, I was there, so I was looking at it kind of in hindsight, but I think we were all willing to give them the benefit of the doubt of maybe a lot of these scheduling issues were caused by, we know there were a lot of day one delays and a lot of weird things happening, and them not realizing they didn't have enough space for the full amount of matches they wanted. But looking at it now, I mean, that kind of statement doesn't really surprise me. There were a lot of robots. I won't bother naming them because I don't want to sound like I'm accusing them of being a part of this at all. But there were certain robots that got some really weird matchups that were not at their skill level, especially in third round when they're at 1-1 and this is for a playoff spot. Meanwhile, there were others that were pretty borderline playoff contenders having to go out and fight each other, where only one of them will be able to get the spot, like Fusion and Ice Wave or Bloodsport and Claw Viper, those kind of robots. So if they kind of had in mind, hey, we want these guys to go through, we'll throw them a 0-1, 0-2 robot for their last match to make sure they get in. I guess it wouldn't surprise me, knowing what we know at this point.
Yeah, I feel horrible that we're considering this, but I honestly think that's probably what it is, and that's not fair to anyone involved. That's not fair to the the teams who work hard, who don't get the cupcake matches, the Claw Vipers and stuff. But it's also not really fair for the pardon my Frenches and stuff to just get a fight where they just don't have a fighting chance. Just where they're gonna get obliterated immediately by the robot, and it doesn't sit right with me. One thing I'm wondering is I feel like it might it's borderline rigging the tournament in a way.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? Yeah. Is we can sit here and a lot of times we'll see some of these outlandish comments and we'll laugh at them. And this is not to say that all of these conspiracy theories are true, because that certainly isn't going to be the case, even if everything we know here is true. But at the same time, it, like I said, it makes you really cynical, because if these things that we know now are confirmed to be true, that does make some of these conspiracies, I guess you could call them, to have some merit to them. And then you have to start looking at big picture of not just this year, but the competition as a whole, these few years that it's gone on. How much of this is biased, how much of it is predetermined. One thing I've always said is I wanted this to be it has to be a competition before a TV show, because that's what separates, live sports from like a Big Brother or something, that it's a competition and it's televised, but it's not really, you're not going there for the competitive integrity, you're going there for the entertainment. And I think that's really what they're sacrificing here. If a lot of these things are true, is the competitive integrity. And that's something that, we can criticize Comedy Central era Battlebots all we want, and how slapdash it was sometimes, but that's something that I think they've always prided themselves on, was the integrity of the competition. I think if this is being compromised as severely as our sources are telling us that it is, because this stuff cuts really deep. This is affecting a lot of matches. It's affecting upwards of 2/3, maybe even more, of the robots in the top 32 where they're saying we want them in. That's every episode we're seeing. I'm not saying it's kayfabe, but they have serious influence over who fights who. And when you've only got 3, and now this year sometimes 2 matches, it really only takes 1 to influence where someone's going. And it's especially bizarre because you can read through the comments, and a lot of these comments from builders and stuff are in public groups, but this isn't just, I think we say they favor robots that are popular, but this isn't even just popular, because some of these teams that are bringing up vocally their serious issues these are popular teams, and I'm not just talking about P1 or Deep Six. I mean, obviously Jake from Hydra, a lot of people would claim that they had favoritism thrown toward them during most of the season, but we saw they had a very controversial decision near the end of the season that they were on the receiving end of. And then teams like Whiplash, I mean, it's a popular team that is an extremely competitive team. They've made their disdain known on social media, especially on their I think it was on Facebook. They commented on one of the posts where they had a very lengthy description of what exactly happened. I saw them in that comment thread liking some of the comments from builders like Brandon when they were talking about the rule changes. I think the amount of builders that are unhappy is bigger than a lot of people would realize. I mean, when Amelia decided not to come because of his issues, I know it was a popular opinion that I don't understand what he's doing. He's doing this alone. I don't understand why he would think that people would join him and back out of Battlebots. But from what I've heard, this was a pretty contentious thing right up until the season was starting about builders being unhappy with their circumstances, and it was kind of a miracle that the whole season even got put together. And I think it was already there then, and now with everything that's going on this year, I mean, we've got Hydra, Minotaur especially. That's a very popular robot. That is easily like top 5 probably popular there. Hydra, we named some serious names that right now are not happy with how things have gone, and we've seen posts now publicly are starting to come out from other builders. I know Bunny Sorial from the Malice team just put something out talking about her frustration. And the point I'm trying to make is that I know a lot of people lean towards saying that these are people just upset that they lost, and I know sometimes some people can reach with what they claim to be bullshit, but a lot of people are unhappy, and some of these aren't really even directly involved with some of the stuff that's gone down, but the vitriol is starting to get bigger than just a couple of builders who want to get paid more and a couple of builders who think that stuff is rigged. I mean, it's pretty wide reaching at this point, and this is going to need to be a serious discussion between now and the time when the next season starts. And let's look at this realistically. It's not that much time, because by the time the show has ended, we're in April now, and filming was in August of last year. I'd assume it might be around the same time this year, and they've got a limited amount of time to work this out. So if I'm Battlebots, they need to be talking to these builders that are unhappy, not just the ones that they're buddy with. I'm not saying that every single complaint needs to be addressed. I don't want it to be too knee-jerk, but at the same time, a lot of these issues seem to be really widespread and almost like a culture issue. So that's a serious and lengthy discussion that needs to be had in this downtime between seasons. And I know they made a statement about the Minotaur and Witch Doctor fight specifically, but I feel like they need to make, especially after this comes out, a general statement about these things, even if the end result ends up being something that maybe I don't totally agree with. I think just going out there and saying something and not having it be just, we've seen a couple of things that they've come out with have been misrepresentative of what's actually happened. I think if they could just go out and be a little bit honest, it would go a long way for fans, builders, and just people in general who watch the show.
I totally agree. That another thing I'm wondering, and I'm thinking about this, is like, you're talking about how builders have spoken up. I'm wondering how many builders are like, bottling it up and not talking about it because they're worried that the producers will reject them next season.
Yeah, actually,
that's
a good segue into something I really want, an important point I wanted to make. We've got anonymous sources coming to us with this information, and I wouldn't exactly call myself a expert journalist, but I have worked with this kind of stuff in esports, specifically Counter-Strike in the past, and one of the responses I see a lot is people saying that this news isn't really valid if people don't name their sources. And I just want to make it perfectly clear That is a brain dead opinion. You can keep that in. I don't care. The reason these people keep themselves anonymous is to protect their livelihoods, to protect legal action and threats from the bigger party. Because in almost every case like this, these are just team members, and possibly sometimes team members that you might not even know the names of. These are just guys who are in the background working their asses off, and if they just come out and try to complain, Battlebots could silence them pretty easily and make them a martyr. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to let everybody know that we're keeping these people anonymous to out of respect for their livelihoods, because their livelihoods are already at risk enough with the scarce amount of compensation they're receiving for what they do, and going and attaching their names to this. I don't want to make them a pariah for what they're doing, because this is important change that needs to be made no matter who's saying it.
Exactly, I agree. It's like there's only one full combat heavyweight tournament going on, and they can't, it's either this or nothing. So a lot of builders are probably really hesitant to address the issues, because they don't want to just be like, oh yeah, your robot's rejected next.
Yeah, when these complaints,
this is our mecca, this is our Evo, this is the top
level. When a lot of these complaints happen, I feel like that probably is an opinion that a lot of builders have, is they're afraid that they're the only ones, or the group of people that have complaints are a too small majority, that they'll get laughed out of the room and ridiculed by Battlebots in the community and the other builders. But I think it really is a silent majority that have some kind of issues with what's been going on.
As we start wrapping things up here a little bit, I just do want to leave in my last few cents here. A lot of people I've seen online are comparing to this whole Battlebot season. I even have to agree, after what I've seen over the past week, to a very Robot Wars Series 7-esque, kind of year. If a lot of Robot Wars fans are very savvy with, how much Mentorn and Five all had their hands in the pool and what they wanted to go down with Robot Wars Series 7. And I'm not saying Discovery was nearly that bad, nor Battlebots. But like what Freeze was talking about, Battlebots really prided themselves on what the Comedy Central era was and what that show ended up being, despite all the goofy skits. That was Comedy Central's end. But the big difference between that era of Battlebots and that era of Robot Wars, and even the modern era of Robot Wars, was that Battlebots, especially in the Comedy Central era, like I said, was a robot competition that happened to be filmed. Robot Wars was a TV show about a robot competition, and that's the line I feel like Discovery and Battlebots is really starting to toe here, like Freeze was saying. And that's not a good thing. You start seeing some of this shady, shankly stuff that we're looking at here that Battlebots is trying to do, and it just feels so uncharacteristic from anyone at the Battlebots team that I've listened to on numerous podcasts, I've seen at numerous occasions, like Greg Munson, like Trey Roski, like Aaron Catling, like any of these other people, like John Remar. You just don't want to have that kind of vibe with Battlebots. I know I can speak for everyone here. I can speak for a lot of people in the online community around the world that robot combat's our lives. Battlebots is something that we've literally been with us since childhood. It's right by WWE there for me, with the stuff I really care about and love. And it's just, this is a whole lot. And like I said at the start and middle and the end here now. Don't get mad at Minotaur, don't get mad at Battlebots, don't get mad at Witch Doctor. They've already addressed this to some capacity. I don't want to speak on it fully since it's not public info yet, but they have addressed this in some capacity, that the rules are changing towards that general direction. So the changes are already being made. The builders have made themselves spoken up. If you love Robot Combat, just keep an eye out. Look around at your live scenes. We're going to be doing a lot more about Extreme Robots. In fact, we have a big Extreme Robots video that will be coming out likely after this one, talking about some of their recent developments and news. And stuff like Norwalk Havoc, stuff like Robots Live, stuff like IIT Tech Fest and the Indian scene. There's Robot Combat all around you, maybe even near you, with some of the local small bot scenes. So there's always a way to support Robot Combat, no matter where you fall on whatever side of the fence. But still give Battlebots your love, I think. Give all your teams your love and support, especially during this time where some of them, like Free said, are going to be, a bit more outspoken and are going to say some things like we've seen with Whiplash, like we've seen with Malice. Being critical and they have their fair points. It's been a very up and down season, and all we can say really is that they hope this is a learning experience for BattleBots. It seems like it really has been as we all move forward to the 2022 season. The excitement is still there. The hype is still there. But yeah, do you guys have any final thoughts before we shoot this thing off?
I just hope that they do better, honestly. There's not much I can really say without seeming like a broken record. It'll be better for the TV show if you make it a competition first. Like people say like, oh, BattleBots, is a TV show first, but like if you make it a competition first, you'll have much better fights, and in turn you'll have a better TV show. I feel it'll be more real, and that's what people tune into BattleBots for. They don't tune into BattleBots to just see, most of the dedicated fans at least don't just tune in just to see their favorite robot win a fight. They tune in because they want to see how the competition unfolds and how, the robots deal with the challenges that they're given, as opposed to just like, oh, my favorite robot made the top 32 after beating Rusty,
Yeah, and I guess what I have to say to extend upon that is if BattleBots thought it was the right decision to manipulate things in the way that they have, or if they think that the way that this season ended was good television compared to if things had gone smoothly, I think they'd be sorely mistaken, because the audience response, to be very, very kind, has been lukewarm at best. I've tried pretty hard throughout this entire season to keep my head on my shoulders and be a rational voice in this community, but I'm tired. I'm cynical now after reading a lot of these allegations. I just hoping that next year these things get addressed in a meaningful and a logical way, because I won't come out here and say I want everyone to picket sign boycott, but if you're not entertained by the product, it's doing its job that it's supposed to, you can stop watching, and I won't hate you for it. I'm still here. I'm still hoping for the best, but I think a lot of that is going to hinge on how they handle this situation going into next season.
Absolutely. And on that bombshell, you've now heard the info. You can make your own thoughts. Please give us your opinions in the comments below. I might be asking for a lot with that, but add into the Reddit post that we will also have on this. Like we also said, check out the document, run it over 3 times, make sure you got all the info, all the facts on it like we have. This has been the Combot Collective here with a very spicy news episode. We promise that they won't always be this long, but this has been a very big topic. One of the biggest topics I think we've ever covered up to this point. This has been Sterling Brown here. Of course, as always, you can find me on my Instagram at SterlingTXTG. I am here with Pory. You can find him on his Instagram at Pory, or on his YouTube, www.dippyegg.xyz. We'll have that in the description below. And you can find Freeze right here at the Combot Collective, giving us his best analysis. We're going to wrap it up here. This has been a hefty news episode of the Combot Collective, and we will see you next time.
This was the Combot Collective. Find us on Instagram and Discord.